Well, hi, church. Thank you for tuning in. We're in Mark chapter 9, kind of a long section today regarding Jesus casting out an unclean spirit from a little boy. I'm going to read it to you here. It's Mark chapter 9. Start following along. I'm in verse 14. It says, "And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, 'What are you arguing about with them?' And someone from the crowd answered him, 'Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able.' And he answered them, 'O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me.' And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, 'How long has this been happening to him?' And he said, 'From childhood. And it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us.' And Jesus said to him, 'If you can, all things are possible for one who believes.' Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, 'I believe, help my unbelief.' And when Jesus saw a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, 'You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again.' And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, 'He is dead.' But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, 'Why could we not cast it out?' And he said to them, 'This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer.'" So, kind of a long section, Mark 9, 14 through 29. And there's a few observations we can get from it and a few applications we can get from it. So, first of all, the setting, just the general setting here. Jesus has come down from the mountain where he was transfigured with Moses and Elijah, and he's with Peter, James, and John. The other disciples didn't come on that little trip, and they're somewhere down in town or somewhere. There's a crowd here, okay? And so Jesus is now joining up with them. And he gets there, and he came to the disciples and saw a great crowd around him and scribes arguing with them. So that's what Jesus sees when he gets there. There's a big crowd of people, and the scribes are there arguing with them, meaning the disciples. So I don't know exactly what Jesus was hoping to see when he came down that mountain, but I doubt it was this, right? And so he wants to know, immediately, verse 15, all the crowd, when they saw him, greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. They're like, "We are tired of these posers over here, Jesus. We're here for something. And now that we see you, we're coming to you." Because these posers, the disciples, are the ones that are supposed to be on the right page here. And the scribes, also supposed to be on the right page. They're good spiritual leaders. They're just having some kind of argument. And here's Jesus. Let's get out of these clowns and let's get to Jesus. That's what happened, okay? Sometimes people come to Jesus in spite of Jesus' disciples. Like we, the church, sometimes aren't doing our job right. And people still come to Jesus because Jesus is that good. They just bypass us. They bypass the church, or they bypass the believers in their lives that they know because they recognize something that Jesus is just that good, even though some of his representatives aren't always doing that great of a job. It's humbling, and I don't mean it as some sort of church bashing thing, but we got to be honest. Sometimes we're just off the game, and that's what the disciples were up to here. They somehow got sidetracked by these scribes. The scribes are always trying to sidetrack. In the book of Mark, man, that's all they're good for. Arguments. They nitpick Jesus all the time. And now Jesus is gone, they're going to nitpick the disciples, and the disciples don't know how to handle it, so they're in an argument. Jesus would rebuke them. He wouldn't just like ignore them and let them get away with it. He would give them good, hard truth when they needed it. But he managed to do it without arguing. He would just lay it down. "Hey guys, actually you think you're a teacher, but I'm the teacher. I'm going to raise the bar, and you're going to recognize how far short of it you are, and you don't get to argue." Okay, I've been guilty of this. I don't know if you're a parent or what, but I sometimes find myself in an argument with my little ones. And I'm like, "Why are we arguing? I'm your dad, and you're just a little child. Why am I arguing with you? I don't blame them for arguing with me. They're little kids. They don't know any better, or they do know better, but they're little. What do you expect? The problem if there's an argument between a 40-year-old and a 9-year-old, there's something going on. Something's wrong there, right? So I have frequently am humbled by this. Just sometimes arguing with somebody, it just means you're stooping to their level. The scribes, the disciples should be above the scribes. They should be on a different. They should raise the bar. They should not lower the bar. They should not stoop to that level. Okay, so Jesus, of course, doesn't like this. The crowd comes to him. The crowd doesn't like it. Jesus doesn't like it. The crowd comes to him. He says, "What are you guys arguing about? What's the problem?" And it says, a voice from the crowd, someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you. He has a spirit of all this. I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." So the guy that started all this had a legitimate problem, a real problem, a major problem. Okay, his son has a demon. It casts him into fire and water, and it's a nasty thing. And somehow this guy's now just a voice in the crowd. Someone from the crowd answered. That's what it says. Somehow the scribes and the disciples turned a legitimate need, a real problem, a spiritual issue. They turned it into an argument, and they're just having a fight. Meanwhile, the guy with the problem is just part of the crowd now. And they're not even addressing him anymore. They're not working on his problem. They're not doing anything useful at all. They're having an argument. It's sad. It's really sad that this has happened. Okay, so Jesus says, then he responds to this, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." How did this big problem turn into an argument and this guy get pushed to the side with the crowd as though he didn't matter and the argument was more important than him? How did this happen? Oh, faithless generation. And not only that, but they were not able to cast it out. So what's that about? Man, why? They ask him this in a little bit after it's over. So Jesus asks him some questions. How long has this been going on? What's the issue? The issue is serious. It's a major issue. Okay? If you can help anything, to verse 22, this is a well-known little passage. If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus says, if I can. Anything's possible for the one who believes. And then the man says a well-known line, I believe, help me overcome my unbelief. That's the right perspective to have, because you got to be honest, you don't have perfect faith. Your life does not fully integrate and align in every possible way with Jesus. It just doesn't. I wish it did. We all wish it did, but it doesn't. And so your response to how you handle that fact on the times, the kind of moments in your life when you kind of realize, whoa, I'm off track. I'm not doing this right. I'm not walking in faith. You're going to have periods like that where you recognize it, where you bump into some major problem, can't fix it. You want to go to Jesus. You do go to Jesus, but you're just kind of, you don't really trust. You're floundering. Okay? Who do you go to for help then? Well, you say, Jesus, I believe. Jesus, help my unbelief. I believe this is. I know this is right, but I have doubts. And Jesus, you're the only one who can even overcome that. Don't wait until you have perfect faith to go to Jesus. Oh, he won't answer my prayer unless I really believe. Well, then pray to him that he would give you more belief. That you can pray sincerely, right? Maybe you're not ready to pray the big prayer. Maybe you don't have the faith for it. Well, pray to him that he'll give you that faith. You're not going to get it on your own. You're not going to just drum it up by trying harder. Okay, you don't have faith, pray more. That's what the guy does. It's a prayer. Help me overcome my unbelief. So that's the right response. And then Jesus does, of course, and he saw a crowd come running together. Verse 25, he rebuked the unclean spirit. You get the impression that he's in a hurry, once again, to avoid the crowd. And now we already know that there is a crowd already there, because someone from the crowd called out to him, Jesus, I took my son here. There's already a crowd. There was a crowd gathering to watch the fight with the scribes and Pharisees. The crowd left that nonsense and went to Jesus. But now Jesus sees a great crowd running. I don't know if this is like another crowd coming running, just more people joining the crowd. Maybe he had taken this man aside from the crowd, and now the crowd is catching up. I'm not 100% sure what's going on, but it's the same basic idea. Jesus doesn't like the big crowds. He's avoiding them. He's always telling people, don't tell anybody that I healed you. Don't tell anybody. Don't do this. He's always getting away from the crowd. We see this, it's a constant theme, right up until Palm Sunday, when he embraces the crowd and kind of causes the crowd. So we'll get to Palm Sunday when we get to Palm Sunday, but it's the same basic idea. He wants people that will follow him out, follow him away, follow him, make it hard. Following Jesus is hard. You're supposed to keep digging. You're supposed to go deep. You're supposed to hold on to him, even when he's out of the way and hard. Okay, so he heals kicks out the demon quickly, and it seems like a particularly nasty one. Even as it leaves, he leaves the boy looking like he's dead, like a corpse. Jesus picks him up, and he's okay. And so, verse 28. When he had entered his house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer." Some of your translations will say prayer and fasting. There's two ancient first century documents of the book of Mark that are basically word for word the same, except right there, one of them says prayer and fasting, one of them just says prayer. We don't know for sure which one is the original Gospel of Mark. It doesn't matter. It's not a major doctrinal difference, though. But that's the reason why your translation might say prayer and fasting. It doesn't change the meaning. And the meaning here is kind of common sense. And that's where this applies. That's how this ties together for us. Why couldn't we drive it out, Jesus? Well, this kind can only come out by prayer. That you should know that already, right? That's not groundbreaking stuff. Whoa, Jesus, what's this new teaching? Prayer? Who ever heard of that? It's not groundbreaking. They already knew this. Everybody should already know this. Most people know that they should pray, right? That prayer works, that prayer is effective, that prayer is biblical. So that's it's an encouragement. Yeah, keep praying. If you didn't know you should pray, start. But I think more than an encouragement, it's a rebuke. The disciples must not have been praying. That's what it tells me. Jesus' response initially when he hears about it, the disciples were unable to do it. "Oh, faithless generation, how long am I going to have to bear with you? Come on, guys. You forgot the first thing. This kind only comes out by prayer." I don't think that there's some special kind of demon that's really, really hard and you have to pray extra hard. He doesn't say that. In fact, there's no mention in chapter 9 here of Jesus praying at all. It's common sense. We know Jesus was someone who prayed a lot. The disciples certainly would have known that. The disciples should have been people who prayed a lot too. There's no reason to think that they never heard of prayer. Like they definitely knew about prayer. Okay, the difference is whether they were doing it. I don't think it's, we got a major problem right now. We can't say a thing about it. We can't do anything. Let's all go pray and fast for 2 weeks, and then we'll come back and cast out the demon. Like, that's not what Jesus did. There's no mention of him praying. He was a man of prayer. He was someone who prayed all the time. And so he was in the habit of prayer and everything else. He was saturated in prayer. The disciples maybe weren't. It doesn't mention that they were praying, and Jesus seems to indicate that they were not. So there's a difference between knowing you should pray, you already know that, and actually praying. There's a major difference here. And the disciples evidently knew the difference, but weren't doing it. They knew about prayer, they just weren't praying. Jesus, why couldn't we drive it out? Because you didn't do step 1. You weren't a person of prayer. Okay? Now, think about this. On one level, we can laugh it off and be like, oh, the silly disciples didn't pray. Right? But now think about it this way. How many times when there's a problem in your life do you go straight into problem-solving mode? Straight into problem solving. Oh, I know what to do here. It's a problem, and I know how to. I'm going to get to work. It's a setback, and I have to work all the harder now. It's slowing me down. I'm going to have to work around it. It's whatever. Let's get this done. Come on, guys, let's go. How many times do you enter into problem solving mode? I don't know. I feel like I often just live my life in problem solving mode. Here's an issue. Let me solve it for you. People come to me as a pastor, often with different issues, with problems, with concerns, with whatever, major ones, minor ones, whatever. And I have found, and I'll just, this is a confession or whatever you want to think of it, but I have found that when it's something that I'm good at, something that's in my wheelhouse, something I'm knowledgeable about, that I'm actually less effective. Because when I think I'm pretty good at it, I'm just like, oh, here you go. You should do this now. Do that. That'll solve it. I go to problem-solving mode, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but it's not the point. All right? When I feel like I'm pretty confident and good at it, I just go do it often. Well, who should be doing it if we want it really done? Jesus should be doing it, right? Let's go to Jesus first. This kind only comes out by prayer. You can't reason this one out. You can't argue this one out. That's what the scribes do. The scribes do that. When there's a problem, they say, oh, well, you should do this, this, and this, and you should do it by the book. And then another scribe will come along and be like, oh, but that's actually not the right way. And remember, Jesus didn't teach like the scribes and Pharisees did. He did not teach as they did. He taught authoritatively. What is this new teaching? This man teaches with authority. He's not like the scribes and Pharisees. Jesus is different. He doesn't stoop to their level. Okay, he says if you want to enter into the kingdom of heaven, your righteousness is going to have to exceed these guys. They're not doing it right. They're falling way short. So don't rely on your own skills, even though you have them. Okay, skills and techniques and worldly wisdom and knowledge, that's useful stuff. It's good to know that. I'm not advocating that you just, forget everything you ever learned and you just go floating along in some la-la land spiritual nonsense kind of stuff. Like, you live in a real world, you know that the laws of gravity are in place and everything else. You don't just close your eyes while you drive and pray and say, I'm going to trust Jesus for the steering wheel. And like, Jesus, take the wheel, literally. Like, we don't do that, right? Because he gave us a spirit of a sound mind, and he expects us to use it. Okay, but on the other hand, he also tells us to live by faith and not by sight. And he tells us to trust in him and not in our human understanding. So we have to do both. And he tells us that the weapons we fight with are of divine nature. Our enemy is of a spiritual nature, not flesh and blood. And so when you're encountering a spiritual condition, it's sin of some sort, anything like that, that's a spiritual condition. Your solution is going to have to be a spiritual solution. I cannot argue my little ones into righteousness. I cannot build a convincing case until they become perfect little righteous angels. I can't do it. I need to parent them. I need to explain things to them constantly, remind them of things constantly. But I'm fighting a spiritual fight. Raising children is a spiritual activity. Your marriage is a spiritual activity. Your singleness is a spiritual activity. You cannot do it right unless you do it spiritually right. The weapons we fight with are of divine nature. We live in a spiritual world, and we have to live that way. We have to recognize it. If you live only in the flesh, Romans 8:13 says you will die. Even if you're fleshly doing really good and smart things, it still leads to death every time. We need to put to death the deeds of the body, deeds of the flesh, and live by the Spirit. Live by the Spirit. So stop arguing people into righteousness. Stop doing it. Start going to Jesus in prayer and let him do it. That's what happened here. That's what goes on. When you're good at something and you trust yourself, you're actually less good at it. You don't solve the major problem at hand. You find yourself floundering around arguing with other scribes that say you're doing it wrong, whatever. And you actually are doing it wrong. You go to Jesus. You go to Jesus in prayer, and you trust him for it. Okay, so that's what I see this doing. If you're in the position where you feel like I don't even have any belief, you say, Jesus, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. You go to him to solve your unbelief. Okay? If you feel like you have it all set and you're in good shape and you don't need him, you go to him, you confess this. That's faithlessness. You're not living by faith if you're living by your own skills. And you say, Jesus says, oh, faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? He doesn't like that. He doesn't like you relying on your own skills and your techniques and your little tricks. When they say, how come we couldn't drive it out? He doesn't say, oh, well, you have to read Psalm 91 first and then pray these exact words and then anoint them with this kind of oil on their forehead in the shape of a cross, and then it'll work. He doesn't give them some technique, some trick. They were probably trying all those techniques and tricks. And the scribes were really good at techniques and tricks, and the scribes came along, oh, you did that one wrong. It didn't even work. You should do it this way. You need to use frankincense instead of whatever oil you anointed them with. Well, you guys, you disciples don't know what you're doing. You didn't even wash your hands, I bet. Like, the scribes are really, of course they're going to argue about it. Jesus says you don't cast out the demon by arguing. You go to God. You have a spiritual enemy, you go to the spiritual superpower who can beat the spiritual enemy. You go to him first. It's common sense. Just do it. All right, we're not going to solve the world's problems. You're not going to solve the evil going on in Afghanistan. You're not going to solve the evil of abortion. You're not going to solve the evil of gay marriage, of transgenderism, of communism and Marxism. You're not going to solve these things by arguing with them. You need to know what's going on. You need to know where the enemy sits and what his schemes are. And then you need to defeat them spiritually, because your enemy is not flesh and blood. All right? This enemy Jesus dealt with was a spiritual enemy, and they were dealing with it physically and tangibly as though it were just another technique, just another person that can be reasoned with or argued with, and it didn't work one bit. Okay? That's what I see in this. If you're spinning your wheels, if you're having family fights, if you're having fights with your kids, if you're having issues in your life, addictions and sins and problems and all this stuff, go to God. It's common sense. Be a person of prayer. Start it with prayer. Let prayer saturate it. You think you know exactly what you're doing in this situation? Get on your knees and confess your pride. Humble yourself before God and let him take the lead. And of course, he might use all those skills you've got, but now he gets the glory instead of you when it works. All right? The human way of doing it, the boat's filling with water, I got a big problem. Well, then I need to bail out and get to work and clear the water and wake up that sleeping guy and tell him to help us out. And Jesus says, you have little faith. You didn't even pray. You didn't go to God first. You're just trying to trust in yourself. And you can get, you know what, if you're a fisherman and you're used to your boat flooding, that's what you do. You get buckets and you start dumping water out. But if you've got God in a boat, you go to God. And you say, God, I'll bail out water as long as I need to, but God, can you please fix this? And then they're all amazed. Oh, what kind of man is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? They're amazed even after he does it. But look, go to God. Trust in God. Do everything you know how to do, but do it by faith in him instead of in yourself, instead of in your skills. All right, don't be a scribe about it. Don't argue about it. Just go to Jesus about it. God bless you. Praise the Lord. Tomorrow we'll go farther into this, and there's a lot of tie-ins in Mark 9. I think one of the themes of Mark 9 is speech, is being mute. Peter didn't know what to say, so he just opened his mouth and said stuff up at Transfiguration. There's the mute kid. There's a lot about speech, and tomorrow we'll get farther into it. But God bless you, and we'll do that tomorrow. I'll see you then.